Congress rushing through a $1.7 trillion spending package likely to saddle our children's children with debt may just be business as usual in the nation's capital. But actions like this shouldn't just slip past American voters as we're distracted by Christmas and moving on to 2023. So for our weekly Worldview segment, we're going to talk about the nation's debt and spending from a biblical perspective. What does God say about national identity? What does the Bible teach us about debt? What lessons does the biblical text offer for considering these issues? Joining me now to discuss this is Dr. Dave Brat. He's the Dean of the School of Business at Liberty University. He's also a former member of Congress. Dr. Brat, welcome to the program.
Hey, great to be on. Thank you. Merry Christmas out there.
Merry Christmas to you. I want to start just getting your reaction to what's happening in the Capitol this week, this omnibus bill. What's your response?
Well, you set it up right, and it's just business as usual or whatever, but that's not satisfactory, especially on a show like this. And Christians, unfortunately, we're taught to love and be kind and gentle, and, the whole Pauline teachings on love, etc. But God's law didn't go away, right? And, do not bear false witness, do not lie. We're just being straight out lied to, right? Procedurally and literally. The biblical teachings, the most important is the first commandment. I'm the Lord your God, period.
Yeah. Dr.
Right?
Brat?
There's nothing in this budget document that acknowledges that fact. The Republican Party have a few lines, 15 lines about God and the origin of human rights, at least. The Democrats only have one mention by
Dr. Brat? I want to get clarification. You said we're being lied to. What do you think we're being lied to about?
Oh, woe's me at the end of the time, right when this thing comes up. Oh, I can't believe this is happening. We got trapped or squeezed. It's Christmas. We got to get out of here. They tell you when they run, we're going to balance the budget every single time, right? And so when you don't do that and you just put on pretenses, and in the few weeks before, anyone who is leading on this issue, basically to not be lying even implicitly, should have been out just screaming that the sky is falling, 6 months ago, a year ago. And for leadership does this, the Republican leadership does this to Republicans, right? So now the Republicans are acting like, oh, my word, I can't believe these guys. $1 trillion deficits again. There's no surprise here. This happens every time. And so it's just morally outrageous. It's not just business as usual. The Republicans are in a tough spot. It's hard to outcompete Santa Claus, right? When the other side says, I'm just going to give you free stuff, but then the Republicans need to explain to the country seriously what's at stake, and they refuse to do that because it is a brutal conversation. And unfortunately, the American people deserve exactly what they're getting, right? They just voted for a certain Senate outcome, and they got it.
Let's talk about the implications of this. There has been some strong minority opposition in Congress. And today, Senator Rand Paul, who's been perhaps the most vocal opponent of this bill, he actually took a picture with all 4,000 plus pages of this printed out to give some perspective on exactly what we were doing. He gave a speech from the floor of the Senate, and he's basically saying that we're constantly waiving their own rules to get this done. Let's play clip 11.
Good legislation is out there to restrain deficit spending, only to be universally ignored and rejected by future Congresses. Today's legislation breaks the Congressional Budget Act rules, so congressional leaders have included in this monstrous spending bill language to simply waive the pay-go rules. Congress has time and time again waived its own rules, and the result has been over $31 trillion in debt, inflation,
the Senate will be in order,
and weakened economy. Let's respect the American people by being responsible stewards of their tax dollars and adhering to our own budget rules.
So about that, why does Congress make rules and then waive their rules because they don't want to follow their rules? Why have them?
Yeah, well, you make the rules because you get to put your name on the rule and then put it out in the newspaper and send it home to your constituents. Look what I did. knowing full well you don't explain to constituents, we can just, get rid of this the day we write the legislation to increase the debt ceiling or pass a terrible budget, do the omnibus. It's all a game, right? And Rand Paul's great, and there's Mike Lee and a few other serious folks in there. And so, it's hard to put the whole weight of the world on about 5 people in the Senate. Yeah, there's a few other good ones that mean business, but they too know. And, if you really want to get serious about this, they needed a year ahead of time and put pressure on Mitch McConnell in public, saying, if this happens, here's what we will do for the next year. And you got to have the guts to go through with that, right? You got to lay down some consequences. We will block the entire Senate because they can. A handful, one person could stop a lot of stuff in its tracks. And they just need to say the country's bankrupt, right? 32 trillion is enough. Here's the line. And then McCarthy, to his credit, who's no better on any of this, he knew exactly what's happening. He was in a room a month ago and said yes to all of it. But now that his speakership is on the line, he's saying, we may not pass Senate stuff. If it has to go through me, I'm going to be tough. And so that's a joke, and it's morally objectionable as well.
Now let's talk about the severity of the situation we find ourselves in. And for some perspective, the federal government has about $5 trillion in assets, which seems like a lot, right? But our total debt right now is $35 trillion, which is, of course, a lot more than that, 7 times more, right?
Yeah.
But beyond that, over the next 75 years, we have $71 trillion in unfunded liabilities for Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, which means for the first time, we just crossed a line where we have over $100 trillion of unfunded liabilities over the next 75 years. Where does this go?
Yeah, well, where it goes is to our immediate happiness. Again, it's hard to find in the good book that we're supposed to be maximizing our happiness. The Heidelberg Catechism and the Baltimore Catechism for our Catholic friends both say, what's the chief end of man? Last time I checked, the answer is to glorify God and to enjoy his benefits. And that's far from this happiness. And so I'm all that to say, what we're doing is we're getting fully funded Social Security benefits, fully funded Medicare, fully funded gold-plated pension retirements for the last generation that's going to get any of that. The kids are going to get nothing. Both of them are bankrupt. You can go out to their own boards, right? The Social Security board and the Medicare board, and back check me on that. Yeah. And then on top of that, you have 32 trillion in debt that we're spending. We just did funny money from the Federal Reserve, 9 trillion on the balance sheet, and then 32 trillion in extra government spending that we didn't pay for over the last years for ourselves. None of that goes to the kids. They have to pay back every cent of our misspending. It's a moral outrage. All the suburban parents who are highly educated should understand this and know this, and yet they just go on with the spending party as usual.
Dr. Brat, do you think this is a form of theft?
It's absolutely theft. I mean, this is what happens when you ignore the first commandment and then do not lie, don't bear false witness, do not steal. I mean, these Congresses are racking them up, right? And then all of it, all the commandments are being violated, right? We want everything for ourselves right now. Do not covet. Boy, do we covet. We covet everything instantaneously. And so, and then the summary of the law through Jesus, right? God, and then love God, love your neighbor as yourself. Your neighbor includes the next generation. This is not love. This is guile, right? It is just treachery toward the people. And this generation has the nerve to love, love, love. We all love everything. It's easy to say all these nice little phrases. It's harder to live it out.
Senator Paul has talked about this as not just a financial issue, but a matter of national security. Do you agree with that? And if so, why?
Yeah, sure, because our greatest threat is China by 100-fold. And we're blowing about 100 billion this year on the Ukraine war, which John Mearsheimer, go Google him, back in 2014, said it was just a disastrous mistake. It was. We messed around with NATO and Eurozone countries and a buffer state of Russia, the mother bear. Never a good idea to poke the bear. Well, we did more than poke. And it looks like now this week a bit, and it looks like hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian innocents are suffering and dying, so that we can kind of go after Russia and we can all the young men are leaving, right, and going south, a lot of the old satellite Russian countries and regions, and it looks like they're going to stay there. And I think our geopolitical hope is that they get strong enough to revolt and give Russia a hard time. So that's the geopolitical objective, and we're willing to talk immorality. I don't know the words to describe it. The explicit knowing that we are sending Ukrainians to die for a proxy war on our behalf to take out a second-tier power, wasting. There's $1 trillion rebuild coming up, right? That's just 100 billion this year for the war, and it's going to be more. To destroy human life without any of this being approved by the American people, or without any strategic objectives being laid out by Congress. Here's why we're going to war. Here's why it's so crucial that hundreds of thousands of people need to die. Young kids and just young families are dying. Nothing. And so, yeah, is it a threat to our national security? Of course, because all these resources are being misplaced now. And if China knocks at the door, we're not going to be ready to roll.
Dr. Brat, when we think about where this goes, and we talked about the fact that we have $100 trillion that we currently own, that number continues to climb. How does this train run out of track? And if and when it does, what does that look like? Because for a lot of Americans still, we look at these numbers, the balance sheet looks bad. But a lot of people are still pretty comfortable. We're in a recession, right? But for a lot of people, life is moving along pretty fine and relatively, especially compared to historically, we're very comfortable.
Yeah.
How do we know that the gig is up? We've spent too much money. We have passed the point of no return.
Yeah, well, the unfunded liabilities you mentioned, those will just get scaled back, right? Instead of getting 100% of your benefit, you're going to go down 90, 80, 70, 60, 50% of your benefit will be paid out. So the next generation will feel those cuts in their benefits because we'll be bankrupt. The government debt is another matter. And the new thing here, the reason we're paying so much attention and it's finally sticking is because the interest rates, right? The federal funds rate is going up to 5% by this year. The Fed announced, right? And so if you take 5% of 32 trillion, that's the interest on the debt, and it's bigger than the defense budget, which we just jacked up by 10%, bigger than the rest of the budget to pay for the Ukraine war and other misadventures. And so that is why the Fed has to cause a recession now and get rid of inflation, right? They cannot afford to pay the debt on the interest. If you just do a 10% of 32 trillion, it's 3 trillion, right? So half that's $1.5 trillion. Right now, we're on a pathway to hit about 800 billion, and that's just interest on the debt payments, right? That's not paying down the debt. That's just paying the cost of money to borrow. And so that's the main piece you got coming at you like a locomotive, and that we're all going to have to see that one, right? That one will be obvious.
Dr.
And
Brat,
that'll force the politicians to tell the truth a bit.
We've got about 90 seconds left, and we've been hard on the politicians today.
Yeah.
But isn't it also true that a lot of the American public, they want these goodies? They want the benefits that the money is providing. And if we're really going to solve this problem, do we not have to get to a place as a population where we say, it's not all about me being comfortable. If we're going to be responsible, it means I'm going to have to not get things that I might like for the benefit of my posterity.
Yeah, well, and so, we, right? We used to be a Judeo-Christian nation. England, London now is not anymore, even a majority Christian nation. We still are in the backdrop, but it's getting so weak, it's unbelievable. And there's a lot of nice people who just want to be nice instead of following God's will for them. And so you're right. And as I said earlier, we just kept the Senate in Democrat hands, who are doing all these crazy things to your children's sexuality, K-12 education, calling you domestic terrorists, stay-at-home teaching moms, locking them up in handcuffs. The evidence was in for all to see. Now you got the Twitter files and the FBI and the CIA in with the government and big tech controlling freedom of speech, which of course is tied to religious claims, et cetera, as well. And the American people validated it. It is shocking to me. And so the days where we had a Judeo-Christian logic are over. I hope there's still a reservoir that can be tapped into, that can be revitalized through Christian faith, and we can move forward.
And that's what we're here for, but we're out of time today. I got to let you go. God bless you. Merry Christmas to you and yours, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks, brother. Great.